Hello, Christopher Nickel here, and today we're going to take a look at the type tool. So just as a brief introduction, type is the term that describes the words and numbers that appear in your design or document. But we're not talking about what the words say, but in this case, it's how they look. So there's a number of different factors that determine the characteristics of type, and we'll go through most of those today and how you manipulate them using the type tool in Photoshop. To begin with, the type tool lives over here about 2/3 of the way down on your tool panel, and you'll see it just as a big capital T. If you click and hold, you'll see that you have a number of different options for your type tool. Today we're just going to be looking at the top two here, the horizontal type tool and the vertical type tool. The tools themselves are pretty self-explanatory based on their names. The horizontal type tool allows you to type from left to right in a more typical fashion. The vertical type tool allows you to type top to bottom. We're going to go ahead and start with the horizontal type tool. And for this, I'm just going to go ahead and use this beautiful picture of Lake Merritt here to make a postcard for my hometown of Oakland. By clicking into this screen, it allows you to add text wherever you want. There's actually two different ways of adding text into the screen. One is the way that I just demonstrated, which is just clicking and beginning to type, and the other is to click, hold, and drag a box that you can then, once again, type into. The difference between these two really depends on the use that you're going to be applying the type tool towards. If you have a specific area that you want your type to live within, let's say you're designing a how-to manual and you have a window that you want to place type in, pulling out this type box is really the way to do it. For a typical design, when you have an open field and you just want to add the words in there somewhere, just simply clicking and typing in is the way to do it. Once you've typed in the words or letters and numbers that you would like, go ahead and come to the top of the screen and hit the checkbox to confirm the typing. If you didn't like what you did, you can hit that circle with a slash through it and start over again. So right off the bat, I would like to point out that as I made my new type, a new layer appeared as well. The type tool is inherently a non-destructive tool, so I really appreciate it for that. Every time you add a new line of type, it'll automatically create a new layer, which you can go to in order to edit anytime you have your PSD, your Photoshop file open that has live layers. So I want to draw your attention up here to the top where the options bar is for the type tool. And you'll see in the first one, these are the fonts that we have to choose from. And the font describes the specific shape that the letters take. And you'll see as I scroll through the list here, it automatically changes the shape of the letters that I have. And again, in order to make this live and happening, you'll have to go ahead and make sure that you're selected the layer that the type tool lives on over in the layers panel. But I can go through this whole list and really choose from a wide range of different styles and shapes that the font could possibly be. Now, which font to choose is a much longer conversation, but just keep in mind that fonts carry with them all sorts of associations in terms of style, culture, era, technology, and other sort of implications that you may want to have your viewer of your document come away with. So think carefully about what type of font best suits the application that you are working on. So for my postcard, I'd like a pretty straightforward big text that's very clear and easy to read. And I'll go ahead and leave it at that for now. Next to your font selection, you also have options of different weights that the font can take. And you can see that they range all the way from very light to very heavy, and options in between. These will also include italics and bolds. So you really do have a lot of options here. Not all fonts contain all of these options. Some fonts, in fact, are really just one shape of size and shape and thickness of letter. The thickness of a letter is oftentimes referred to as the weight. Other fonts, like Gill Sans here, actually includes a wide number of different weights and italicizations and bolds for you to choose from, so you can really get that right sort of exactly right sense that you want. So I want a nice bold font here for the bold City of Oakland, and I'm going to go next over here to what is the font size. So this determines the scale of the font. You can go all the way down to something like a 12 point, which will make your letters quite small, all the way up to a 72 point from this easy to access drop-down menu. There's another way of adjusting the size of your font, and that is bring your cursor over this little small t, big T icon here, and you'll see you get a scrubby hand. If I click down and I drag to the right, you'll see my font size increase. And if I click down and drag to the left, you'll see it decrease. This is a really quick and convenient way to easily change the size of your font as you're working on your file. I'm going to go with a good even 100 point here for my text. Finally, you have different alignments of text. So this allows you to justify your text to the left, to the center, or to the right. This is less important when you're just simply clicking into the document to select the location of the font, but it's much more important when you are working within a text box. Either way, consider what you want your text to align to. If you want your text to align to the center of a document, go ahead and use the centered. If you want it on the left, go ahead and use the left, and same on the right. In this case, I don't really have a specific alignment that I'm looking for, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the default left alignment. When you are making your text, you can use the Move tool to reposition it wherever you like, and again, making sure that you are working on the correct layer for the text that you want to move. And if you have Show Transform controls, you can also change the size and shape of your text. I'm going to warn you about this. People who are very particular about fonts, professionals who work in the design of them, do not like it when people change the thinness or the thickness, the height of the font. They really believe that fonts have been designed to be perfectly balanced in the sort of proportion that they're in. So it's really best just to work with the scale of the font without adjusting the proportions of it. So you can, you see, through the Transform tool, actually change the scale of the font that way as well. And if I go ahead and I accept those changes and go back to the Type tool, you'll see it'll actually reflect the new font size that I've selected through the Transform tool in the window up above. Of course, I can easily override what I've done and go back to a font size that I'm enjoying. There is a nice shortcut here to the Move tool that I think I should highlight for you. So the keystroke shortcut here is actually the Command tool when you have the Type tool selected. So by simply holding down Command, you'll get the Move arrow, and that's a really quick and easy way to be able to adjust the position of your type. Moving to the right here on the options bar, you have a rectangle of color, and that color actually depends on the color that you make your type. By clicking into that rectangle, it allows you to select any color you want from your color picker. It's a really quick and convenient way to very rapidly change the text color within your design. Since we are dealing with Oakland here, the official color of the city, of course, is green, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with my green choice. But if you move away from your text layer and you move back to it, that selection is still live. So remember that you can change the color at any point that your text layer is still available to you. Now this, I think, is a useful time to point out that there is, in fact, a special panel just for text. And if I click on my window menu here, I can bring it down here and bring you to the character panel option, which will open this window. There's also a shortcut to it, which is this little symbol right here. That will also open your character panel. But you have a lot of the same options here that you do on your options bar. You have your font, you have your font weight, you have your font size, you have your color. In addition to those options, though, you have a whole nother range of options. This here is actually the spacing between lines. Since I only have a single line, it won't do anything right now. But if you had multiple lines, 2 or more, in your document, if you change the dimensions of this setting, the lines will get closer together or further apart. There's 2 different ways here that allow you to adjust the distance between the letters within a word. This one on the right is the one that more commonly works, so I'm just going to direct your attention to that. But you'll see if I go up to 200, the space between the letters gets bigger, and if I go down to 100, the letters get closer together. So you have an incredible amount of control as to how close the letters are to one another, and you can really select a setting that suits the design that you are working for best. Next here, on the left and right, you have controls that allow you to adjust the height of the letters to be taller or shorter. And same with the width of the letters. I will give you the same warning that I gave you before about using the transform controls to adjust these dimensions. Type designers are very particular about this, and they think this is quite bad form to do it, but you're not a type designer, so go ahead and make those adjustments as you see fit. Finally, you have an ability to raise and lower, or in this case lower and raise, the height of your type. This is especially useful if you were to append something to the end of a number or a word that would say something like, the 13th, and you want to add that little th up a little bit higher. So you can go ahead and do that, and simply by clicking into the word with your text tool, you can select certain letters and without selecting the entire word, and affect those independently from the rest. Okay, so finally, down here in this lower, I don't want to be just affecting those guys, I want to affect them all. In the lower part of the character panel is you have a range of different, they call these faux effects. So you can do a faux bold, so you can bold the font even beyond what you can do in your options panel. But if I was to add a bolding effect there, you can see that the letters get thicker and heavier. I can also do an italicization, which is a fancy word for making your letters lean a little bit, which allows you to add emphasis to certain words. This button here allows you to switch all of your letters from lowercase to capital. So if you're debating between what the best sort of way of presenting your type is, whether it's lowercase or capital, you can easily switch back and forth and see what's best. I think Oakland is a capital all the way across, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. The next button, however, gives you a similar but different option, which is it allows for capital letters to appear larger and lowercase letters to be smaller, even if they're all in caps. So I've written this all in lowercase, but let me demonstrate this by replacing this with an uppercase O. So if I turn this off, well, let's see here. Yes, I want to keep that change. Sorry, it doesn't allow you to proceed until you keep that change. I've written this as Oakland with a capital O. If I switch it to all caps, it just goes to all similar sized caps. But if I go to small caps, the capital letter stays larger and the lowercase letters turn capital but are kept at the same scale relative to the original. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and keep it that way. So you can see that you can convert letters quickly and easily to superscript, which, as I mentioned before, is the th sort of thing, or nd, or subscript, which does the same thing but to the bottom. Finally, you can add underlines or strike-throughs to your design as well through these buttons. Okay, so going back up to our options bar, let's look at what else we can do. This button here, Create Warp Text, allows you to manipulate your text in even more dramatic ways. Actually, for this one, I'm going to add one more line. So I'm going to go ahead and type in greetings from, and I'm going to go ahead and change this pretty significantly. So I'm going to unbold it, I'm going to take off the capitals, and I'm going to go ahead and change my font to something that I think is more appropriate for my postcard. So that looks pretty appropriate. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shrink my font way down, not that far down. That looks pretty postcard-ish. So now I can go ahead and position my greetings from, and just to finish with the Oakland theme, I'm going to go ahead and change my type to yellow. Now, with my greetings from layer selected, I'm going to go up into this Create Warped Text tool, and this pops up a new window that allows me to select from a range of different shapes to bend my type into. And you can see there's some that are similar to one another and do kind of similar things. There's ones that are radically different and really distort the look of the text. So this gives you the ability to really alter not just the size and shape of the letters, but the shape of the sentence overall. I think for this classic postcard, I'm just going to go with a simple arc. And by selecting that, you'll be able to see that this gives me a full range of options for how to manipulate even this fairly basic warp. So I can make it bigger and smaller from one side to the next if I wanted. That gives it this sense of maybe disappearing into space a little bit. Also from top to bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and go with a plain old undistorted version though. And I can, obviously decrease and increase the warp, the shape of the warp, so that it goes above and below the level of my words even. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with this shape, and just going back to my move tool with the show transform controls, this allows me to not only move the position of letters, but rotate it slightly. So that move tool is very, very useful for working with type as well. And you can go ahead and make these nice subtle adjustments. So I've gone through this design and I've made some pretty significant sort of changes to the look of my type, but I'm not done yet. I'll show you one more thing that you might find useful. So going back to my layers panel, I'm going to select my Oakland again, and by putting my cursor into the open area of the layer where there's no text and there's no icon, I'm just going to double click and that will open up my layer style panel. So we've looked at the shape tool before and the ability to apply layer styles to shapes. Well, these layer styles also work on text. So you can see if I click on drop shadow, immediately a drop shadow appears around my text, and I can make all sorts of wonderful adjustments to it in terms of the size and the distance, creating an effect that my text is floating off the page a little bit here. In addition, I can add a little bit of a bevel and emboss, which gives it a real three-dimensional sort of look. And I can make it more significant or less significant, just in order to give it a little bit more dynamic a character. There are all kinds of options here you can see available to you through the layer styles, and pretty much all of them can be applied to text. So that gives you an almost infinite number of combinations in terms of how to affect your text and make it appear in exactly the way that you want. So that's it for my type demonstration here. I really hope that you have a sense of how many options that you have in terms of working with type and how many different ways that you can present the words that you have in your design. So don't just stick with the basic straightforward font or sticking with a small insignificant size, but really use your expressive abilities and your creative abilities to imagine a design where your text plays an active and dynamic role in making it as interesting a design as possible. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this video.